Hello, I'm Sean Gray, a production manager of New Orleans Uptown in Mid-City. Now that we're in hurricane season, we're going to talk to you today about how to protect your windows on your houses, your businesses, and places you love from strong winds and heavy rains. First thing we're going to want to do is identify the windows we want to protect. Then we're going to get a measuring tape and measure those windows so we know what size of plywood to buy from our local hardware store. We want to extend a couple inches past the window on either side so it has enough purchase to screw into and not directly into the window trim. Before we go to the hardware store, we want to identify the type of material that we're going to be screwing into so we know what types of tools and materials we'll need from the store. As you can see, we have a brick exterior, concrete, so we're going to need to get the screws that will fasten into that the best. We're going to the hardware store. Let's go. When we get to the hardware store, there's a few things that we need to get to make this job efficient and best possible. First thing we're going to need to get is a drill, something to screw our fasteners or screws into the plywood into our house or business. Next, we're going to need to get the appropriate screws that I mentioned earlier, whether they be concrete screws, wood screws, or anything you need to fasten that plywood to your house or business. The last thing we'll need is a pre-drill bit to make it easier to screw those fasteners into our plywood and into our house. Once we get all these tools and material, it's time to go to the lumber section of the hardware store. When we're in the lumber section of the hardware store, we're going to find someone to help us, not only to identify the correct plywood to use, but also to help us load it and unload it onto our vehicle. The ideal thickness of plywood that we're going to look for is either 5/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch to give you maximum protection from storm damage. When we find our plywood and we get the appropriate amount that we'll need, get that helper in the store to cut it down to the correct size, which we took earlier at our house, so we can have them ready to go when we get back. Next, what we're going to do is stage our plywood at the appropriate windows. I'm going to take that plywood and I'm going to place it and prop it up so it's easier to mark and to identify. I know which window this plywood's going to go on, so I'm going to make a mark and say that it'll be covering up the office window, so next time it storms, which it will, we know which wood goes where. Next, what we're going to do is make some marks on the plywood so we know where to drill and where to install. I like to come in about an inch to both the top and the sides on all four corners of the plywood so I know where to pre-drill and to install my screws. After we've made our marks in the corners of the plywood, what we're going to do is get our pre-drill bit and drill through the plywood so it makes it easier to put our fasteners in, not only through the plywood, but into the house or business itself. After you've made your pre-drill holes, what you're going to do is get a helper, take it to the desired location, and install it with the screws that you bought earlier. After you've installed the plywood around every window that you want to be protecting your house or business, you can also apply a water sealant, which you can find at the local hardware store. Although the plywood will do a great job of protecting your house from water intrusion, if there so happens a time where water gets inside your house, business, or place you love or own, please reach out to SERVPRO of New Orleans Uptown in Mid-City. This is Sean Gray, signing off.